candidate start his or her career in machine learning as a fresher?
So breaking into the field. So I'm basically assuming that this is relating to the like finding a career in machine learning, right? Probably as an engineer or a data scientist or something like that.
Yeah, as a fresher.
Okay, got it. So there are different ways where how you can get into machine learning, right? So first thing is like basically either you join in a machine learning team or a machine learning company as an engineer and get to learn a lot of things totally in the job. There are some companies which are which invest in your learning capabilities and would rather teach you anything that's needed for the job after you join. There are some other companies which essentially require some level of prior experience with machine learning. That is like you have your fundamentals clear, you know some basic algorithms. They probably don't expect you to be a machine learning expert when you're a fresher, but they do expect some basic knowledge. I don't know, some kind of a coursework or some things like that. Now, if the case one is rather simple, that you essentially, I'm assuming that you would probably be a software engineer, familiar with basic data structures, algorithms, etc. You join a company and learn machine learning there, and that totally works out. On the other hand, if you don't have a necessary experience to begin with, and there is a company that requires some level of understanding, then I think preparing machine learning would be preparing by yourself at home would be very useful. The main question boils down to how do you prepare, like how do you do a self-study kind of a thing. So there are multiple options today. First off, there are a few programs out there which are like 3 to 4 month crash course kind of a thing, where they teach you applied machine learning. So like how do you take machine learning as a field, as a technique, and then apply it to real world problems. And they teach you the necessary tools associated with it and the basic concepts of machine learning. Now that requires some level of commitment and extra time, which a lot of people might not be able to afford. In which case, there are a lot of materials available online, which I have personally found very useful. Some of the massive open online courses like maybe Andrew Ng's course on Coursera, or some books like Learning from Data. These books could be very useful. And one of the things that I found particularly useful is taking up some real world data sets from, let's say, Kaggle, and trying to build some basic models by yourself using some open source tools. So once you do some of these things, and you go for an interview where people are expecting some basic knowledge, I'm pretty sure that they would see the skills that you have gained through these courses and books, and would be more than happy to entertain you, even if you don't have experience building big machine learning systems.
Nikunj, what do you think, how to break into machine learning field as in the education background, or any certifications that are needed?
Any certifications? So here's the thing, like I particularly okay, so basically there are different levels at which, again, I can answer this question, right? So for some people who already have a formal education in machine learning, right, if you have obtained like a master's or a PhD in machine learning, then like that obviously speaks out that you have spent years understanding the subject. I'm assuming this question is more for people who are not necessarily, who don't have any formal education per se, and still want to have some kind of certifications on, let's say, their resumes to land a machine learning job. Honestly, I have seen in my experience that very rarely people care about seeing your certificates that you're obtaining from machine learning courses. Like as an interviewer, I interview a lot of machine learning candidates, and I almost never care whether the candidate has mentioned that they have like 13 different certificates from online courses. What I really do care about is whether when you say that you know machine learning, are you able to answer the questions? Do you really understand the basic concepts? So basically, my suggestion in here is, as opposed to run after particular certificates to land a job, I think it's more important that you genuinely try to learn machine learning as a subject. And for that, some of the things that I listed before, that I mentioned earlier, could be useful. There could be other resources that you can look up online. Essentially, don't necessarily need to invest a lot of time in getting certificates, but you should invest time in brushing up your fundamentals.
Here comes my next question. What is the best job search strategy for a machine learning position?
Um, So a job search for machine learning to me is no different than any other job search. You essentially need two things. One is some level of expertise in the subject, and the second is some contacts where you who could connect you with the appropriate job openings, because you as an individual cannot know all the jobs that are open and might be relevant. So the first part we already discussed in, I guess, Vamshi's question and a couple other questions before. The second part is probably the more important when it comes to job search. So essentially, I would imagine that you want to put the word out that you are looking for a machine learning job. Now, what does it mean by putting the word out? That obviously you go tell your friends that, hey, I don't know, I'm graduating or I'm looking for a new job and I want to get into the field of machine learning, so that your friends who might be working at some companies or just know some managers or their peers, etc., they could refer you that, hey, one of my friends is looking for a job. You also potentially want to go on LinkedIn and specifically call out that I'm actively looking for a job search, because that would also help to increase the breadth of your network and let people know that you are interested in looking for a job. So I think once you put enough word out and you can communicate that what is specifically that you're looking for, you would potentially have a lot of people getting in touch with you, and you do the interviews. I'm assuming that you are actually preparing for machine learning positions. So with these two things, you would end up in a good position, I would say. And honestly,
what do you think are the 3 tips to make your resume stand out for a machine learning position?
So this question is also very similar to me. This question is very similar to the previous question that I answered. And I don't have 3 tips to make your resume stand out for a machine learning position. I have only one tip. That one tip is, don't do things to have a shining resume. Just do your work or your preparation properly. So if you are writing code, let's say even in a non-ML type of position, right? Do it properly with a genuine interest of building a great system. If you're managing a project with less individual technical contribution, make sure you are doing that job right. And if you're taking ML courses, make sure you do it to understand and learn ML, and not show any certifications in your resume. It's simply because when you do things with a sole purpose of putting things on your resume or making your resume stand out, you end up doing a superficial job at it. And people are very easily able to catch that in interviews. I have been an interviewer myself. I have seen a lot of experienced people. And the major complaint that leads to candidate rejections is, hey, they're not able to back that, support that with their answers. Like when I try to dig deeper into it, they fail miserably. And that's the thing I want people to understand, that you should not be doing things to just make your resume look good, because it very easily is, people are able to detect that very easily. Instead, even if you don't have very good machine learning experience, but let's say you have been a phenomenal software engineer, for example, just do that job properly, write that in detail on your resume, and tell your interviewer that I learned software engineering having started from XYZ and position, and now I am interested in learning machine learning, and there will be a lot of companies who would value that kind of honesty and give you a chance to come in here and learn machine learning and contribute there. I think that usually works out as a better strategy long term for the candidate themselves and the companies as well. And trust me, I do not mean to get philosophical here. I think it's a very practical advice because, as I mentioned, more likely than not, a candidate is not rejected because their resume was not good enough, but the fact that they were not able to back their resume. That's more often than not is the more reason.
Is important skills required in a machine learning engineer?
So as an individual contributor, I have found myself, okay, if I want to break down a machine learning problem, right, I think the first challenge that a machine learning problem poses is how do you even formulate a particular problem? And being able to formulate the problem properly is one of the key ways to solving a machine learning, is one of the key steps to solve a machine learning problem. Now, why does formulation become such an important step in ML particularly? Because machine learning has different paradigms with which you can solve certain problems. Like you can either go with supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. There are different techniques with which you can, in which you can formulate a problem. And each of these paradigms work well with certain kind of problems. Now, once you have identified that I want to go with a certain technique, then even then you want to further formulate it as a, let's say, a classification problem or a regression problem or a ranking problem. There are different ways you can formulate that problem, and how you formulate is a key to your success in the problem. So, which is a skill that comes with a lot of experience. So I guess to give you an example, like one of the problems that we discussed earlier, which was ranking the digits in an image, right? Or not, sorry, understanding what digit is in a particular image. You would probably formulate that problem as a classification problem because the digits could be from 0 through 9. So there are like 10 different buckets in which your image can fall into. So essentially, you want to classify that image in one of these 10 categories. And the approach that we talked about earlier falls into the realm of supervised learning, where you have a few images and a few labeled data set that you have provided your algorithm to begin with. So problem formulation, I would say, is one of the key skills in solving a machine learning problem. The second thing that I think becomes very important is your understanding with different algorithms, like understanding of different algorithms. Like, do you understand trees very well? Do you understand logistic regression? Do you understand different deep neural networks? Because again, some of these algorithms are better suited for certain kind of problems. And even when you have chosen a particular algorithm, do you understand the nitty-gritties of it enough that you can tune the model to suit best with your particular problem? And that kind of a thing can never happen until you have a reasonably good understanding of these algorithms. So I think just knowing your fundamentals and theory of the algorithms is the second most important skill. Last but not the least, you should be able to write code yourself that can take your understanding of machine learning, your excellent problem formulation to real working solutions. Because if you're not able to code, you can think and have a very good intuition about the problem, but you will never succeed as a machine learning engineer, because people usually like to have people who can write code and experiment and deliver things end to end, as opposed to someone who has a lot of ideas but are not really able to do some productive work out of it. So I guess problem formulation, theoretical understanding, and implementation, these are probably the three most important skills that that it takes to solve a machine learning problem end to end.
Says, is there any some blog that you follow that helps you to get an idea of the recent developments in the field of data science?
So I'm particularly interested in a lot of ML engineering techniques, and for which I follow blogs from most of the big companies that are doing a lot of AI research including Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, of course. And besides that, what I end up doing is there are certain when I'm solving certain problems, I go read a lot of associated papers, which gives me an insight into um, some of the more cutting edge work. And you, from there on, what I end up doing is I end up reading a lot of papers which are in the reference sections of the main paper that I'm reading, which also gives me a breadth of knowledge. So essentially, for depth, I would obviously go deep into a particular paper that I'm reading, but that also gives me a good breadth because I go through the reference and read out some of the associated papers. So that's my typical way of keeping myself up to date with the recent advancements.
Fantastic. For machine learning, and how often do you have to use maths as part of your daily job? I'm sure he dislikes maths or he likes maths.
Yeah.
So he's asking it with different math
So
subject.
that's a great question. So basically, to me, the field of math that becomes very important in machine learning is essentially linear algebra. Um, a lot of machine learning is basically dependent on how you operate on matrices, because most of the algorithms are optimized based on matrix manipulations. And for that, I have seen that my linear algebra courses from undergrad come in very handy. Besides that, if you are also familiar with a bunch of optimization techniques that come in handy, and obviously some level of um, differential calculus is also useful because you end up using a bunch of differentiation in your ML algorithms. Now that said, um, today, even if you don't have a solid foundation in all the three things that I mentioned, but you have a very good intuitive understanding of the algorithms, and you are able to fill in the blocks in your head with about some of the mathematical equations, with all the tools and technologies that are the support available from the community, you can still get past reasonably in most situations without having a very deep understanding of these mathematical tools. If you know these, they would certainly help you in a more solid foundation. But if you don't know this, that's not a deal breaker, according to me. You still obviously have to understand ML algorithms and the tools around that, but you can get past that without knowing all the detailed technical maths.
He's saying, is there a way to get better at problem formulation?
Okay. Um, I think this is a skill that really comes with practice. So I think the probably I would change the question to how can I practice more of machine learning problems. Now, obviously, like you can, besides practicing things yourself, you can go ahead and read a lot of blogs, as I mentioned earlier, because I get to learn a lot from the way people have solved machine learning problems themselves, and getting to read for blogs from some of the startups who are doing deep technical work in ML, or some of the big companies. You get to see that, okay, this was the problem that they were trying to solve, and this is the approach that they took. They would obviously tell you at some level that how are they formulating the problem. But I do think that reading alone is not sufficient to get past, to, like, become an expert yourself in formulating problems. You have to get your hands dirty at it. And a very good way that I've found myself um, use a lot is basically taking up online data sets from Kaggle, or even participating in competitions if you have relatively more bandwidth. That really helps. Just take any data set, try to formulate it as a machine learning problem, use some of the existing tools to solve the problem end to end, and that will give you a lot more clarity. And once you do that, you can go ahead and check the techniques that other people have used, because usually there are also a lot of blogs from masters at Kaggle who would tell you that, hey, this was the approach they took, and then you can compare yours against theirs and see how, how can you learn and improve better.